mean, the horse's head is interesting. Yeah. That comes up time and time again, and not just from Britain. The lake monsters reported from elsewhere in the world, and that is the same characteristic, a horse's head. So
but that's kind of like the old dragon, the old drawings of dragons.
Exactly. In fact, some of the prows on the Viking ships are very, very horse-like serpentine, and the idea is, could they be based on sea serpents? Were they not imaginary? Were they actually based on real creatures?
Right. You sort of prefer to call the monster a sea serpent because
well, a water serpent, a water monster. Sea serpent is a bit of a misnomer because whatever they are, the chances are they're not snakes. The whole physiology and the whole movement is totally different from a snake. But that's the type of name that's been given to them. For better or for worse, they're sea serpents.
But the thing is, there's many scientists now that are saying whatever's in Loch Ness could be, as some saying, it could be a sturgeon, for instance, big fish. But these witnesses, they're not describing these animals. They're describing completely different animals.
And John, your niece saw this as well.
Yes,
and sort of corroborated what you saw. Well, thank you very much for calling. I wish I'd seen it. We stood there and he spent 6 years trying to see it. We spent about an hour.
But you get frustrated when somebody just stops off for 5 minutes for kind of a cup of tea and a chat and says, look, there's nothing there.
It's encouraging because I'm not in the right place at the right time, but one day I will be. At least somebody's seeing something.
At least you're not that obsessed that you couldn't come down here today. I mean, well, I can't bear to tear myself away from it, just in case.
No, it's just about managed.
Yeah. All right.
All right, John, thank you very much for calling. Let's move on to Marion. And you're talking about a similar... Good morning, Marion.
Good morning.
Good morning. You're talking about a similar kind of experience, but you weren't at Loch Ness.
I'm afraid you're not coming through very well.
Can you not hear me? Hello?
Not very well, love.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what, Marion, we'll come back to you in a minute. It was obviously got a bit of a problem on the line. I'll come back to you. I'll move on to Bernard. Bernard from London now. Hi, Bernard.
Oh, hello, Judy.
Hi.
Morning.
This happened a long time ago, 1948.
That's right.
What did you see?
Could I just give a bit of background on it?
Yeah.
It was on a terrible disgrace of a troop ship called the Ascanius, which Mike Milligan has mentioned in a couple of his books as being equally bad. My friend and I were a little bit more romantic than most people who were downstairs playing cards most of the time. But we used to go up on deck every night and see the sun setting and the sharks sleeping about. And this was one night out of Mombasa, and all of a sudden, sort of in the halfway to the horizon, a huge, typical Loch Ness Monster type creature reared up out of the sea, sideways on, very slowly, went over and down, and that was it. And the person that I was with, we said, well, we won't tell anybody because nobody's going to believe that. And nothing more happened. And a couple of years later, there was a little tiny piece on the front of the Express, and it read something like, and on New Year's Day too, and this didn't mean anything because they were Arab fishermen. And it was in about the same spot as we saw this creature.
A similar
report. It said, fishermen while fishing off this spot, a huge creature with a neck 200 feet high, reared up out of the water, had a head like a hippopotamus and yapped like a dog.
And how big was the one you saw, Bernard?
I couldn't begin to put a size on it. It was
big?
Enormous. It would make the Loch Ness Monster look like a puppy.
Blimey.
What's the problem with these sightings?
Well, the interesting thing in the description that he gives, he said that the animal actually undulates up and down. Now, that's really interesting because snakes, the sea serpent you think is a snake, snakes can't do that. There's very few creatures that can, but there is a creature called a zoologist, which was a very, very long serpentine whale, up to 70 feet long. And that could. I mean, that has supposedly been extinct for 25 million years, which sounds a heck of a long time. But a lot of the reports fit almost identically to the skeleton, to the physiology that we know from fossils of a zoologist. You've got the right size, you've got the sort of horse's head again, and you've got this vertical undulation. And that has been reported from many parts of the world.
So there's a lot of these things.
There are. There are well over 300 lakes all over the world with these reports.
How would it have got into Loch Ness? I mean, the open sea is one thing, but...
There's a debate as to whether or not Loch Ness at one time was open at one end, at the Inverness end, like a fjord. And that at one time animals were using it, coming and going. But then, since the land's risen up and formed Inverness, we've had the slight problem of an ice age coming along. So, possibly whatever's in the Loch now arrived after the last ice age.
Yeah.
There's also one other thing. In Ireland, these creatures are being reported, and there are a lot of smaller lakes, and there are reports of them actually being seen on land, moving from one to another.
There are reports of
Nessie.
Something being seen
on
land. In the
but the Irish ones are particularly intriguing because they're described as gigantic caterpillars, literally humping along like that. Once again, the vertical undulation. And that would explain how they can move, how they can be in several lakes literally at the same time. They're migrating from one to another.
What about
And they're
Michelle?
reproducing, presumably.
And perhaps even going to the sea. They mightn't even spend their entire life cycle on land or in fresh water. There's a lot more to this once you get into it.
Yeah. Obviously. Look, thank you, Bernard. Thank you for that, and you were pretty scared. Now, Michelle, who's 18, is calling from Norfolk, but you used to live next to Loch Ness, did you, Michelle?
I did, yes. When I was about 13, my and my friend were doing a charity event up at Murray Firth Radio, and we finished about midnight, and my friend's dad was driving us back in blizzards, and we were joking, saying, oh yeah, you know, we're going to see the Loch Ness Monster. And just over from Loch End, I actually saw it was about a 30-foot hump in the water, and I was scared.
But did the other people who were with you, did they see it too?
Yeah, they did, and as Stuart, is it? The guy who looks after the monster on the lakeside.
Steve, I look for him,
Yeah, sorry. I actually met him a couple of years ago when I was up on holiday, because I used to live there. And we do actually get ridiculed. If you do say you've seen Nessie, then, you know, you're in for so much stick, especially if you're local.
So was this hump moving, or was it just sitting there like a little island?
It was stationary. We didn't stop to have a look. I mean, the foot was down on the accelerator and we were out of there.
No, that's interesting. You see, why would you run away? Why? See, I mean, if I was driving past the loch and I saw something, I'd be out of the car.
You'd keep in the water.
I'm coming, Nessie, I'm coming. You know?
Yeah, it's different. I mean, if you actually do see it, I don't think you'd be in the same situation. I think you'd probably... I think it's fright.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Did you report it, Michelle? Did you tell anybody?
Well, I went into school the next day. I used to be a pupil of Glenacket High School, and we were talking about it the next day, and I got so much stick. I mean, I thought, oh, well, I won't say anything else, so my friend doesn't want to know.
Why do you think to take the mickey out of people who come in and say, I've seen something?
Because of the way the
conformity.
reported.
Yes, and also conformity. You know, you're doing something outlandish, you're doing something very different, you've seen something no one else has. So people don't like that. Everyone has to conform.
It's interesting, isn't it, though? It keeps coming through that people who've seen something are absolutely terrified.
Well, think of the
the
word monster. We tend to think of monster today as a two-headed, weird creature from space films. But the original term of monster was something fabulous, wonderful, startling, amazing. And the term monster has been used for generations in relation to all sorts of mystery animals. Well, and there might be something more to that than meets the eye. That's not just coincidence.
And if you go into any of the Scottish tourist boards, numerous and wonderful shops to buy your souvenirs, they're all very sweet and jolly. They're all like this, aren't they? With little tartan caps on and everything.
Things change.
Things change. Listen, let's get a story from someone who hasn't seen the Loch Ness Monster but thinks they may have seen something very different. John from Cornwall. Hello, good morning, John. Are you there?
Yes.
Hello, hi. What did you see when you were driving from Cornwall to Stoke-on-Trent?
Well, I was just approaching the final part of Bodmin Moor between Bolventa and Alternum, and suddenly down the bank at the side of me appeared this large cat-like creature with a half-grown sheep in its mouth. It jumped in the road in front of me, and it was picked up by the headlights of my van. It turned and ran up the road away from me, so I slowed down to avoid hitting it more than anything, and was quite amazed at it. It was about 1 metre long, the body, but what struck me was the length of its tail. Its tail was about 4 feet long, which was longer than its body, and it was like a large Siamese cat, but chocolate brownish colour. Right. It may have been black because I had the headlights on it, and it was sort of breaking daylight.
Okay, John, let me talk to Carl. Do you think he saw one of these cat-like beasts that are on the prowl?
If the size is correct, yes. I mean, you know, that creature is very big. You're talking about a Labrador-sized animal with a very long tail.
Could it have been a dog, though? Simple mistake, John. I mean, it's the length of
definitely not a dog. Its tail was far too long, and it turned right and ran across in front of me. It wasn't running like a dog. It was padding. It was sort of on...
Okay, John, thank you very much. You're not sure about that one,
well, if it's dog brown, I would have said a puma. But as he said, he's not sure of the actual coloration. But it's the size of a puma, and the long tail is very characteristic of a puma, which tends to curve up at the end.
And that's what people have suspected, that this beast of Bodmin might be.
Some of them have said a puma, some have said a black panther. The problem is the coloration. Not everyone's sure what it is.
Listen, I want to take one more call from